We're back 7:30 on this Easter Monday, and you were looking at a familiar site, the site of St. Peter's Square, which yesterday was filled with people celebrating Easter and cheering for what seemed to be a triumphant return of Pope Francis as he rode around in his modified open-air Pope-mobile. It turned out to be a triumphant goodbye, however, and this morning that square is filling with mourners who have heard the news that Pope Francis has died just a few hours ago. Joining us now to reflect on his life and legacy is professor, journalist, and author Candida Moss. She is a CBS News papal contributor. Candida, thank you very much for being here. I wanted to clue in some non-Catholics in the audience who may not know what the big deal is with the Pope. Yes, head of the Roman Catholic Church, but I also think it's so interesting that it's a living chain of connection back through 266 others to the time of Jesus, to St. Peter, to the very beginning of all of this. When you think of Pope Francis, his role in these past 12 years, and all of that history, what stands out?
Thanks for having me. Yes, so the Pope is really speaking for God here on earth, and it is this unbroken change. And what is really distinctive about Francis is that he led by example. There's a lot of pageantry that surrounds the papacy, and Francis cut right through that. He was a man of the people. He went out to meet people. He was washing the feet of prisoners in prison. He was what people think about when they think about Jesus of Nazareth.
I was reading that earlier in his life, when he was growing up, he was a doorman at bars in Buenos Aires.
Wow.
Apparently a very good tango dancer. Big fan of...
Tango dancer?
Yeah, he could dance. Yeah.
He carried his own suitcase. I remember being surprised when I
Big
first saw
fan of
that.
Lionel Messi, would wear
Wow.
an Argentina soccer jersey anytime he could. Talk about that human side of him. He had a lot of charisma.
He did, right? This is what we remember Francis for, charisma. And he was a bouncer at a nightclub for a time. He was apparently very in love when he was young. So he's very relatable. He's the kind of person you can imagine being friends with as a young man. And his charisma, the sense of authenticity you got from this man, that shone through in everything he did.
What was his best asset, do you think?
I think his honesty and his relatability. When people looked at Pope Francis, they saw a grandfather, they saw a man that they related to. He wasn't standoffish, he didn't seem remote.
And speaking of his honesty and relatability, he spoke on specific topics and broke some of these norms that we were used to coming from the Pope. I mean, talking about same-sex marriage, gun laws here in the United States, environmental issues, even sex abuse within the Catholic Church. What is his legacy? Because some people say it is quite complicated.
It is complicated because the Catholic Church doesn't fit into our neat political boxes. When you think of Francis, he's a man who led with love, right? So love towards everyone, towards those who are marginalized from the church, towards LGBT Catholics, to divorced and remarried Catholics. And I think that's going to be his legacy, the demand for a pope who leads by example and who leads with love.
But they said at the end of the day, it was described, he changed the lyrics, but he didn't change the tune. What does that mean to you? And do you think that's true?
I think that's accurate. You know, Francis was very welcoming, but he didn't take bold steps towards a new progressive church because the Catholic Church moves at this glacial pace, and he didn't want to leave conservatives behind. He wanted to bring everyone along. And this means that for progressives, Francis didn't make as much progress as they had hoped.
So we've been talking a lot about the Pope as a man and his outside game, you might call it, how he presented the church to the world, how he talked to parishioners. But then there's the inside game as well, by which I mean he was able to appoint electors who are in the College of Cardinals who will choose the next Pope. How influential was he there, and what kind of legacy do you think he'll have?
Well, you're exactly right. He appointed more cardinals than his two predecessors combined. And if he wanted to game the College of Cardinals in order to determine who his successor would be, he could have. But what he wanted was he wanted a conclave that represents the global church. So he appointed conservatives as well as liberals.
Interesting.
And so what we'll see as his legacy is whoever the next pope is will have to speak for a global church, for all of Christianity. We won't just by default see a European.
Yeah, 2/3 of Catholics now live outside what we would call the West.
That's right, and he wants a church that represents that membership.
All right, Professor Candida Moss, thank you so much. We appreciate you.